Right, okay. What we're going to look at, or start to look at, in the next sort of series of clips, is field work. Why? Well, I think this is the section that most people really struggle with. During your GCSE geography, you will have done two bits of field work, a physical investigation to do with rivers and an urban investigation to do with urban areas, Birmingham and the surrounding area. So I thought it might be a good idea to actually film what we do. So there will be one of these clips where you're actually seeing field work in action at the places that you've been to, or if you didn't go, it'll be a handy reminder of what you did. Or like I said, if you weren't able to make it right to the top of the waterfall, at least you'll be able to see everything, and hopefully it will refresh your memory. Okay, that's the idea. Now we are also going to do some other little clips that will take you through the different sections or components of a geographical investigation, and I'm starting with this one here. Now it's just a copy of a PowerPoint slide that is on the T drive and the S drive and is available for you to watch in your own time. There's also a copy of the revision PowerPoint online that's available. What I'm going to start with is this idea of what could we actually measure about a river. We decided to do rivers for our physical fieldwork investigation, and we took you out to a place called Carding Mill Valley. Okay, now as it says on this slide here, they give it the fancy title geographical investigations. What it really means is field work. An investigation should follow a logical sequence, like a scientific investigation or a sociological investigation. A geographical investigation is exactly the same thing. It follows a sequence of things that we're going to investigate, look at, gather data, present data, analyse data, write conclusions, and then evaluate the whole thing. As you can see on here, this really is examined, so it's not coursework as such, although we would have done coursework under the previous specification. They put this topic 6, as they call it, geographical investigations, is on your second exam paper, and there are 2 questions you have to answer, one on rivers and one on urban fieldwork. That's what we decided to do. We could have done coasts, but it was a little bit tricky. We could have done rural, but we seem to think that rivers and urban was an easier thing to do, local tours, and it actually linked more directly with bits of the specification. So in topic 4, you'll have looked at rivers. In topic 5, you'll have looked at urban areas. Okay? The key thing to remember about the investigation is there's 2 main aspects to it. The exam will ask you about your own field work, so your own experience of rivers or urban. You'll be expected to know in quite a bit of detail and to be able to write about it. You will also be expected to look at somebody else's rivers investigation and apply what you've done to somebody else's field work. Now this clip really will be quite short, but we're going to start looking at the sort of starting point of any investigation, understanding the title, thinking about hypotheses and key questions for investigation, and what a good key question or an inquiry question should look like. Okay? That sentence there is quite an important one. The investigation title is set by the exam board. What that means is literally that. They decide that title, and everybody doing rivers field work has to investigate that title. Okay, how we investigate it is down to us, and different schools will measure different things, but essentially everybody is doing the same title. So if you've got somebody else's field work that you've got to look at and answer questions on, you've got to keep that in the back of your head. They have had exactly the same title that we've had. This one is very long and it's very wordy. Investigating how and why drainage basin and channel characteristics influence flood risk. It's incredibly wordy, but let's see if we can unpick it and actually work out what it's going on about. I think the first phrase, flood risk. We all know what a flood is. Well, we should do. Okay? We all know what a flood is. We know that some rivers are more prone to flooding than others. We also know that there are many and complex reasons as to why rivers flood. It's not just a case of there's too much rainfall. there are a whole host of human and physical reasons as to why a river floods. We also should be aware that flooding is more likely to occur in the lower part, the middle to lower part of a river long profile. You know that it starts up on high land, you know that it goes down to the sea, okay, that's basic stuff. It's more likely to flood middle to lower. Okay, now if we go back to that title, what it's actually asking you is these two things: the channel and the drainage basin. Two key things about a river. How are they influencing whether a river floods or not? Okay, now the simple answer is going to be, well, yeah, they are going to influence how a river floods. But there are lots of other things as well that will influence how a river floods or not. Okay? And just so that we can remember, what do we mean by the river channel and what do we mean by the drainage basin? Well, the channel is very, very simply, with this picture here, the bit that's got the water in. Okay? That is the river channel. The drainage basin is the area of land that surrounds and includes the river, that it naturally drains into. Now that might give me one or two ideas about what I could measure. What is it? What characteristics, what features of this channel might influence whether a river floods or not? I'm starting to think about, well, is it deep? Is it wide? What features of a drainage basin are going to influence whether a river floods or not? Is it steep? Is it flat? Is it highland? Looking at this little diagram here, it's more likely to flood down here, surely, than it is up there. That bit's going to be steeper. That bit's going to be higher land. You've got gravity on your side flowing downwards. And also looking at this picture, well, it's wider here, it's deeper here, it's more likely to flood. So that might give me one or two ideas about what I could actually measure. Okay? In fact, I'm going to go back a bit. Before I get to my key questions, I can't measure that on its own. That title is just too difficult to measure as one entity. Okay? So instead, what we've done, which is good practice, we've broken that title into three things that we could investigate. Now, obviously, these three things are connected with the drainage basin or they're connected with the river channel. They're things that we can actually measure. Now, sometimes they're called key questions, sometimes they're called inquiry questions, sometimes because they're phrased as a question, they're called hypotheses. But these are the things that essentially we're going to investigate. Does the width and depth of the river channel increase with distance? Does the gradient, slope angle, and the height of the land decrease with distance? Does the velocity, which is the speed and power of the water, the discharge, which is the volume of the water, increase with distance? Okay? Now I'll talk about in the second clip where we actually develop those questions from, but they're phrased as a question because eventually in our conclusion we're going to try and answer them, and that will then help us answer the overall title. Okay? A good feature about these questions, you've got a couple of variables and you've got it linked to something else. Okay, and if I got somebody else's fieldwork and I've got some very brief information about somebody else's fieldwork and it said, come up with some questions for investigation, I'm not just going to write something like, the river gets wider, the river gets deeper. I'm going to try and connect them to something. So in this case, we have connected all three of them with distance. Because we're assuming, aren't we, that the further I get down the river channel, the more likely it is to flood.